and our collective areas of interest to bring you a series of masterclasses throughout the year that are interesting, that are relevant to public sector workers, public sector leaders, and brings you a range of influential and exciting, inspirational speakers. We are really delighted today to bring you this masterclass. So just while everybody is joining us, I'm just going to remind you of the housekeeping for today. So if you could keep your microphones off during the presentations. We really do want this to be an interactive session. So please use the chat box, introduce yourselves, share any thoughts, any comments or questions throughout the morning. Myself and my colleague Louise will be monitoring the chat box, so we will be able to pick any questions up, and we'll make sure that we can highlight those to Susie and to Richard as appropriate. So this masterclass promises to be a really different space for you as leaders working in the public sector to really consider how you can bring more kindness into both your working and non-working life. And I know when you look at the news, when you hear the stories from around the world, it can really feel like the world is devoid of kindness. And I think this is a really important time to just pause and think about what kindness means for us and how we can bring that intentionally into our leadership practice. And for me, kindness is care. It's about love. It's about that positive intent towards people. And I think it's very easy when the world around us feels very bleak, and even the kind of our local context in the NHS or social care or other public sector organisations feels so constrained that kindness can be lost. And I think it's so important that we're going to take some time this morning to really think about how we can be more intentional about how we care for and love the people that we both work with and for. So this promises to be a really highly interactive and thought-provoking session, and we really hope that you will enjoy the session this morning. You can see the agenda on the screen there. There will be a couple of breakout sessions. We would really ask you to embrace those and get involved. And Christina, if I could have the next slide, that would be great. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Susie Cook, Chief Executive at Aqua, and Richard Tyler, who is a guide, a coach, a psychotherapist, and a systemic constellator, which I'm really intrigued by. And if you'd like to find out a little bit more about Susie and Richard, their biographies did go out with all the preamble for the session today. So by all means, go and have a look and find out a little bit more about them. But I'm now going to hand over to Susie and Richard, and thank you very much for the session.
Thank you, Kath.
Thank you.
It's really refreshing to hear in a leadership space the word love talked about. I'm a big advocate of bringing that word and that quality into this space, and often with a lot of resistance. So it was great to hear that, Kath. I appreciate that very much. Good morning, everyone. I never take for granted that I get asked to come along and play a part in sessions like these. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for making the time to be here today. I know time is precious and valuable, and whatever we give up costs us somewhere else. So thank you for making the choice to be here. I think, as Kath's already said, what Susie and I are hoping for, at least our intention for today, is that today feels a bit different for you. And I guess there's a caveat that comes with different, which is often some discomfort, because different generally brings a bit of the uncomfortableness which I know isn't a word, but we generally feel a little bit uncomfortable when things are different. So whilst there will be space to chat in the chat room, we will be asking you to come off of mute after the breakout session so we can hear some of your voices and hear your views that way. A couple of asks for today, or at least one is, my request is that when you're in the room, be in the room. Now, I think we spend a lot of time in the room, but not actually in the room. We're kind of physically there, but our minds and our hearts and our attention is somewhere else doing other things. And that's okay, because lives are busy. So my encouragement is be wherever you need to be. So if a text message comes in or something that you need to respond to, then respond to that thing and be fully with it, and then come back and be fully here. I think we spend a lot of our life being never fully anywhere. So yeah, when you're in the room, be fully in the room. Today, I think, has two strands to it, which is, maybe we can just pop the first slide up, please, Christina. And today is very much about being offering food for thought. So we want to massage your minds and your thinking and your ideas. And perhaps I'm going to say more importantly is that today is about tonic for the soul. And I think Kath's already alluded to it. We don't need to look very far to see our world being destroyed and devastated in so many different ways when we look at the global wars and genocide and political downfall. And we are living through actually fairly tough and challenging times. And I think many people, certainly that I work with one-to-one, feel that their souls are quite shredded. So I think today is about being tonic for the soul. I think even just the fact that we're naming kindness and bring it into the room, regardless of all the other conversations we'll have, is essential. I'm very lucky that whilst I sit here and get to see some of your beautiful faces who are on camera, I also have a window in front of me which looks out onto a field with trees, and I get to see all the many, many autumn colours. I love autumn. Autumn feels like my favourite season, and this time of, I guess, quite natural shredding and shedding that comes in autumn. And I love how the trees are starting just to gather their energy back into their trunks, down, pushing it down into their roots so that they can grow again next year. But of course, with that comes this letting go of stuff, the release of, the leaves drop to the floor so that their energy is well spent. And I get to go out and walk my dog at least once a day. And walking the dog is some time for me to reflect on a lot of stuff. Some people do it in the shower. I tend to do it on the dog walk. And I'm often presented with so many different reflections and ideas as I wander. And I see our natural world out there, and I see the trees and the grass and the hedgerows and our more than human life actually looking pretty battered this year. 2024, I think, left us with a lot of rain. 2025, we've had this excess of sun. We seem to have no spring. And the landscape looks quite broken. And it feels as if the landscape is calling to us to say, no more, we can't do it like this. You have to pay attention, and you actually have to start looking after us, perhaps in ways that we haven't looked after our natural world before. I think the natural world is actually calling out for us to show it some kindness. And perhaps the reality is that we failed to show enough kindness to our natural world, and we're now kind of paying the price a bit for that. Did we fail to show our natural world enough respect, enough love, maybe? And that there is some repair required for our planet. And then I wonder about today's session and thinking about the ways in which we treat other people with kindness. And I look at the organizations and the teams and the systems and the families that I support in my life. And I wonder if they are also bereft of kindness. Are people longing to be shown some kindness and some care and actually some love? So I'm I often wonder, and I wondered this morning as I walked our pooch, are we treating our landscape in the same way in which we are treating each other? Are we treating our landscape without love and care and respect? Are we treating each other in similar ways? And there is some repair to do of both. But my own truth is that in so many ways, we are all interconnected and everything is entangled. And when we change the quality of our own health and we choose to work on that, in turn, that affects our landscape, and our landscape has a chance to recover and repair, and vice versa. When we start to show love and kindness and respect to our landscape, in turn, our bodies feel better and our systems feel better and our nervous systems settle. My wife and I made a very conscious decision to move out of London at the start of last year to have somewhere with some land where we could have animals, and we bought a small holding. It was after probably the most testing 2 years of my life and of our family's life. Wow, and I notice every time I talk about this, I am reminded how difficult it is to talk about it. So, and I still need to talk about it. So in 2021, Christmas 2021, I was diagnosed with an incurable cancer, and I was given 4 months to live. And what happened in those next 9 months feels like it almost broke me, with the stem cell transplant and months of chemotherapy. And I look at the ways in which almost it devastated my life and our life. So moving here was very intentional, with the hope that being amongst our natural landscape and getting out of London would play a part in me having the best chance of recovery and repair and restoration. And what we bought was a 200-year-old cottage with land and a cottage that feels like it was also longing for repair and love and kindness. So we kind of found ourselves in this place saying, how do we recover our lives a bit? And how do I live however long I have with this incurable cancer to live life most fully and to be as well as I can, and at the same time bring some wellness and some good health back into our house, which was very unloved, and 5 acres of land, which was also unloved and pretty much dead land. And whilst we came here with the vision of planting trees and rewilding and planting new hedgerows, we look at the soil, but the soil is actually dead here. It's old agricultural land. And we've realized in the last 8 or 9 months that actually, in order for there to be new growth and new hedgerows, we have to put nutrients back into the land. If we want growth, we have to put nutrients back into the land. So here we are today talking about kindness. And I think there is this parallel process of the ways in which we need to be kind to our planet and the ways in which we need to be kind to ourselves and each other, the people that we come into contact with. But today isn't about bolting on kindness habits and kindness skills. I'm not here to teach you how to do kindness, because actually you know how to do kindness. It is inherent within us as humans to be able to access the quality of kindness. But we are talking about planting the opportunity for kindness to regrow within our systems, whether that's a family system you're in, a community system, your organizational system. We are looking for ways for kindness to take root again and grow, and acknowledging that much of the soil that you're working in is quite dead land, is not nutrient rich. I'm very fortunate that I have experience like you of being a human. I can stand alongside you as being, well, as mostly human as I've managed in 50 something years. But I also have experience of working as a coach and a systemic constellator with health systems and private sector organizations for 25 years. And sadly, I also have to be on the receiving end of NHS and healthcare for the last 3 years, more times in hospital than I would have liked. So I feel like I have an understanding of where kindness grows, where kindness doesn't grow in those organizations, and some of what gets in the way of kindness growing. So we're not going to teach you ways to be kind, but it is about, Susie and I, our intention today is to help you remember how to be kind, how to bring kindness to yourselves and to others, but also how we think about how do the systems in which you operate in regrow kindness? And what are some of the reasons that get in the way of us doing something that is very inherent, very natural, and that for most of us, we long for more kindness? So that is our plan, at least for today. And as Kath already said, there is going to be plenty of time for you to be in breakouts and to chat and talk and wonder about this question of where is there a kindness deficit? How come? And actually, what is our response to it? And whilst we don't always have an answer, because there isn't one answer or one truth, but we do all have a responsibility, and my sense is an accountability to choose the ways in which we are responding to the issues we see around us. So just before I hand to Susie, what I want to do is I want you to have an opportunity just to drop out of your minds, which will either be buzzing with who is this bloke, what the hell is he talking about, and all of the other 500 things that you maybe need to do today. And I'm going to get you just to drop into your bodies, and I just going to encourage you to ground yourselves a bit. So if you're in a space where you are able to just get really comfortable in your chair, and if you feel daring enough just to allow your eyes to gently close, if you're in a space where you can't let your eyes close for one reason or another, then just take quite a fixed gaze onto something. Maybe if that happens to be outside, if you can see some greenery or even a plant nearby, then that will work too. But to get yourselves comfortable just for a few minutes, allow your eyes to just soften their gaze or to close. And all you need to do is just listen to the sound of my voice. And so what I invite you to do, first of all, is just to notice the quality of your breath and noticing how extraordinary our bodies are at being able to regulate our breathing when we allow them. When we get out of the way of our bodies know exactly what they need to do. So I want you just to settle yourselves into whatever you are sitting in, a chair, a sofa, a bed. Maybe you're sat on a train dialed in. But just to notice how the chair is holding you. So right now and for the next 2 hours, actually, you need to do nothing here. You are going to be held by us and you need to do nothing. And I want you just to notice your breath in, and I want you to notice your breath out. And as you do that, I want you to imagine that dropping down from the soles of your feet, deep, deep down into the earth, are your roots, tethering you to the ground, keeping you connected to this planet. And because they go deep, deep down and entangle with all other sets of roots, it means you are always held firm. So just imagining that for a moment. And as you do so, I want you to notice if today, in this moment right now, you are holding any tension. Tune into places like your jaw or your forehead, your shoulders. And I don't need you to do anything to change it. Just by bringing attention to it allows it to settle. And notice where there is any tension. And just take your attention to it for a moment. And in response, your body can then settle a little. And I want you just to notice the thoughts that you are holding this morning. Maybe they are coming at you from all directions. I wonder what happens if you move those thoughts to just in front of you, seeing them pass you by, almost like clouds or a stream running past you. And of course, you can choose to jump on any thought that comes along and get carried along by it, or you can choose to notice them, actually just with this sense of how you have many, many thoughts and you are so much more than your thoughts. Your thoughts are one part of you. And I just want you to feel in your body what the quality of kindness is like to receive. How does it feel in your body? And where in your body do you feel it when you experience receiving kindness? Maybe that's kindness that you offer to yourself, or maybe it's kindness that you receive from someone else or something else, maybe a more than human being. Just the last couple of breaths that you are conscious of. And then bringing yourself back into this shared space together, eyes open, and I'm going to hand to you, Susie.
Richard, thank you. I didn't close my eyes because I thought I might go into my own world of Libra, so I thought I would just watch the leaves out the window. And this is, I'm absolutely privileged to be here, seeing 66 people on the screen with us, Richard. And I guess I'm just going to go off a little off piste, which you and I often do, Richard, before I come on to, the offer and the call to arms, in that some of the things that you've described this morning feel quite important to me, just to signal again that there will be people sitting with us this morning thinking, this is uncomfortable, or I don't know where that's going. And I guess I want to just signal to those people, I understand that. And if I go back over my years working in the health service, starting off as a clinical biochemist, my life was very much structured, evidence-based. And it's through the learning, the experiences, the challenges, being in senior positions in organisations, but then being fortunate enough to come into a role where I can work with people, reflect and support people, you realise that your journey through your career and life is spattered with kindness and unkindness. And I think the work that I know you and I do together, Richard, and what we individually do with organisations and individuals, it is so important, because that brings me to the why this and why now. We are and have been facing for many years significant change, but even more so at the moment in public sector life. The pressure is mounting. The financial constraints are tighter than ever, and it creates an environment where stress increases and well-being is often forgotten. So we might mention well-being, we might say, we've got well-being agendas, we've got strategies around well-being, but what does it really mean? What does it mean to be on the receiving end of well-being, and how do we support people with well-being? Within that, the whole concept of kindness, being kind to one another, it's often forgotten. And if it's not forgotten, I think you're very right, Richard, it's not always acknowledged that we've received kindness, and that's really helped us. And you reminded me this morning of my board yesterday. I received kindness in my board yesterday from my Neds, and I did appreciate it and flag it, and that's really important. And I think if we don't get into this space, and albeit it's uncomfortable for people, there will be, and there is, we can see it, a cost to the avoidance of not paying attention to it, because it affects our well-being, it affects our health, it affects our families, it affects our patients. And as well-being and kindness dips, we know, and the evidence is out there, that sickness rises in organisations, not just public sector organisations. What comes with that is the impact of those individuals and their family lives, but also on the pressure of those left trying to cover the service and deliver the best service they can, and the implications of that impact on our people and our organisations, and ultimately the impact on some of our patient outcomes. And we start to then get into an even deeper decline, and we see this in the cultural surveys of kindness and unkindness. And if we go back to the very realms of the NHS and why it was set up to treat people's health, offering of compassion, love, care, support. The thing that Kath mentioned this morning, love's really important. It's hard to describe, and it's very hard in the working environment to mention, but it's key. But the pressures that we face and the conversations I have with people on a regular basis and the systems that we're working in, they become mechanical, and we lose some of that softness and ability to connect on that soul level that you well described, that takes us into being able to do the best work we can do. And I think today it is really special for me in that it's giving us a space to think, and for people to think, and for us, Richard and I, to offer support to yourselves and organisations in a journey of re-allowing kindness to, as Richard describes it, re-flourish. This is not about a tool and a technique, because that won't solve the problem of kindness and unkindness. This is about wisdom and insights of bringing science and the day-to-day role we play in curing and supporting and trying to support lives against the body and the soul of how we weave kindness through everything we do, even when it's challenging. And I think this is for us to take a bit of time to think about, and as Richard alludes to, nature, Harvest Festival, and Richard's pinched some of my lines there, because Harvest Festival was always a fabulous time for us. And I remember my daughter saying, I really love Harvest Festival, Mum, but Grandad makes a box that's so big I can't carry it down the aisle in church. Do you think you can take a few things out and take them yourself, Mum? And it was out of his love for his allotment, the space he you know, loved and nurtured and gave to his grandchildren, and is no longer with us. And my girls find that really special now when they reflect back about what that allotment meant to them, and the kindness he showed to them, and the kindness that my girls now want to show to people. And I think there's a need to really think about, as Richard says, our soil, the climate for regrowth, the need to reinvigorate that soil for the next season in our NHS, and the need to renourish, reinvigorate that soil and make it nutrient rich, not just for us that are in the service, but how do we really make it rich for those new seedlings that are wanting to come into the NHS, that are at the moment hearing, you don't want to come into the NHS. How do we make it a place for them to join us, and for the people who have been with us for many years to want to stay with us and do what they came to do? And I think today is about how we, as you as individuals, think about yourselves and planting that seed to make sure the climate's right for your teams and individuals, that the soil, whether it be a ward, a team, a whole organisation and individuals is nutrient rich, that we're creating the best conditions for that growth, that we hear climate's changing. It is, it's changing out there in nature, it's changing in the NHS rapidly, but we have to work in it day to day. We need to think about how we adapt, the same as we are reforestation and rewilding areas which have suffered years of misuse. We need to think about ourselves as individuals in that space, and we need to make sure that this becomes nutrient rich so that we take people with us on this journey. And it might sound to some at this space and time, oh, this just sounds, you know, something that's over there. It's not. Our soul and our work have to come together to make this really effectual in the NHS. We are losing our sole purpose as we watch finances become constrained and people's roles be reduced. And we need to think about how we re-nourish that ground. And I want us to think about that seedling as a metaphor, as a leader, to create the environment through growth and kindness to re-energise the NHS alongside the complexity, alongside the science and the evidence base, because it will only truly flourish if we bring all the parts together. And I'm going to hand back to Richard, but just finally say what we really want to leave with today is you having thought about that space, what you need for the future, how we can all work together for the future, because without it, we won't succeed. Richard, I'm hand back to you.
Thanks, Susie. Susie, do you want to touch briefly on what we want them to think about in terms of the offer? Are we going to, whether they are going to spend some time reflecting on whether they're up for that, or are we just doing that at the end?
We'll do that at the end, Richard, because I think then, having reflected
Gotcha.
on this conversation this morning, it'll give people time to think.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the offer.
See, folks, you see, this is live, in action, figuring out what we're doing. Okay, so thank you, Susie. Okay, I wonder what is taking root in your mind already. I wonder what is stirred within you. I wonder where you notice any resistance to actually what we've talked about. Yeah, I just want you to keep checking in what you're hearing here and what your body and your mind is telling you. Okay, so could we bring up, please, the bridges slide? Yeah, this one. Okay, so this is in advance of inviting you to head off to a breakout room. But this feels like a really important piece of our conversation today. William Bridges wrote a fabulous book. It's only a little yellow book, and I think I lose him sales, because what I basically say is, once you've got the whole concept of the book, you don't actually need to go and buy the whole book. But that feels very unfair. If you do want to go and buy the whole book, go and buy it. It is a brilliant read. And what he talks about is this whole idea of transitions, and that we're locked into the idea of what change means. But actually, most of what we talk about in change, and if you think about the idea, which many of you know about, first order change and second order change, and first order change is about making adaptations, small changes. Maybe we redecorate the wall and we move the furniture around with our first order change. But our second order change is where we make deep transformation within the system, from the very bottom all the way through the system. And it's almost about system redesign, and we strip it right back, almost as our natural world is doing at the moment, is stripping away. We're entering this phase of wintering, where we will be back to being, the world will be naked in order that it can regrow again next year. And Second order change is really about stripping everything away, looking at the very root of the system, and looking at how we need to help it grow into whatever it is we want it to be for the future. And William Bridges' work, what he very simply says is that when we head into a new period of change, we step immediately into what is new. So we move straight into the new strategy, the new process, the first steps. And I'm sure many of you, you're on the receiving end of it. Certainly as a member of the public, I see it when I hear our government talk about systemic change and process change. And it's almost like one day we go from this is how we're doing it today, and now we're going to this new way, and we walk straight into the new way without actually leaving behind the old way. And what Bridges talks about is, in order to step into change, we have to begin with an ending. We have to begin with an ending. So this very first part of it, which is ending, losing, letting go, is the essential piece that I think in my last 20, 25 years of doing this kind of work, is that I see organizations and teams miss, and they jump straight to the new beginning. And this first part is about saying, in order for us to move forward, so imagining we want a system that grows and flourishes and enables for this session more kindness, but replace that with any quality that you want to have more of. In order for us to have that, what do we need to let go of, release, leave behind, say goodbye to, move to one side, acknowledge, thank, show appreciation, show gratitude for, in order that we can actually mark out an ending and let go. So this is the release. This is on the principle of, if we don't let go and make space, there is no way we will be able to have a new beginning. We have to be able to clear out and make room in order that the new can come through. Once we've done that, we move into this second space, which is often referred to as the neutral zone, which is where we begin to gather our resources. And they might be psychological resources, they might be physical resources, they might be emotional resources. It's where we get really clear on our intentions, on how much will we have in order to move forward. It's beginning to plot our first steps. It's ensuring that people are aligned and gathered around and all living and working from the same intention, before we then move into the third space, the new beginning, which is, so now we actually begin. How do we start this? And how will we measure it? And how will we track it? And not just what will we think about it and where will we cognitively understand it, but actually what's that going to be like in our bodies? How will we feel it? How will we know we have started? In the example of our work today, what will it feel like if we were in this system that held more kindness, where there was more energetic exchange of kindness? It's actually an incredibly straightforward concept to talk about, and I think to bring to bear into our lives, whether that's our personal family lives or whether that's our organizational lives, is a bit more challenging. So what we're going to invite you to do is, Christine, if you could bring up the next slide, please. So we are going to pop you into breakout groups. So there'll be groups of five to seven people, and you will have 7 minutes before we bring you back. And here's the question we want you to consider. So if we choose to embark on the adventure of bringing more kindness into our system, what must we, and that's for you to go, what must we as a collective first release and let go of? So what gets in the way? What is in our old world that feels the world of a kindness deficit? And that might be the stories you need to let go of, the beliefs you need to let go of, the behaviors, the policies, the attitudes, maybe even the people that you need to let go of. I often, when I do this type of work, and I do it entangled and aligned with systemic work, is that I ask this question, and what a lot of people will tell me is that actually what we need to release and let go of is Fred Jones, who used to be the CEO here 10 years ago. And although he left 10 years ago, energetically, it's like he still walks the corridors and he still has a grip on the way in which we do business here and the way in which we relate. So I see that a lot, that even though people have left, it's almost their energy and their footprint remains. And we need to make some conscious decision and acknowledgement that those people and their ways of doing it, whilst we can learn from it, actually they're no longer a part of the system. So this is the question. You might need to take a screenshot of that if you want to, so that someone in your group has the question available to them, or maybe we can stick it in the chat or something so that everyone has it. So we're sending you off. My hands are up here, so I'm not pressing any buttons to send you into rooms, but someone will do some magic and you'll appear in a room, and then in 7 minutes you'll appear as if by magic, like Mr. Ben, back in this room.
So first of all, huge thanks to all of you, because it's not always easy that going out to breakout rooms and what's this going to be like. So I hope the spaces that we've created are environments where you can just have that open conversation and share some of your thoughts and feelings. That's more important than anything. So thanks to all of you who left and have come back, because it looks like the number that left have come back, and we want the rest of the spaces to be like that. So thank you for embarking on that with us. So the question and the challenge, the gauntlet that Richard laid down for us was, if we choose to embark on an adventure of kindness into our systems, what must we first release and let go of? And we were just talking while you were in your breakout rooms about, almost that tank being full, and what do we need to release to allow us to find space to do this? And we're not going to put anybody on the spot, but anybody who wants to comment or would like to take themselves off mute, we want to hear your voices and your views. We've talked enough. Please feel free in this safe, contained space to speak up and share with us what you talked, or put it in the chat if you don't want to, and we'll pick it up through there. But I can see Simon. Simon, come in, please do.
Hi.
Hi.
We were interested. We were talking about the NHS and the pressure to save money and run it like a business. And we were within the group, there was clinical and non-clinical, and we were saying it seems to have lost sight of patients and staff, and that staff who were moved around into jobs and slotted in and suitable alternative. And then there was a challenge, but what's the kindness thing to the business, to keep. And then we just got on to talking about, there's a horrible term, no criteria to reside, and these are patients in hospital who are obviously sick, but if you look at them as a business, they shouldn't be here, and you use derogatory language to, it's terrible. But, they could be my mum or my dad, sort of thing. So it was interesting how we use language, and, I challenge people and say, we need to get this number down without really understanding it. So that's where we got to.
Simon, I'll hand to Richard, but I've got to come in there, Richard, sorry. Simon, what a great reflection of a session. And it's really important, isn't it, that point you've made about the language we use, because actually that can change everything, the language we use and how we speak to people. And I do wonder what we can do in the space around how we do change that, because you're right, we use acronyms, don't we? Our patients are becoming acronyms and numbers, and our staff are as well. I think you're very right. And in this massive climate of change, that's slotting in and all of those things, you're so right. Richard, I'm going to hand to you for your reflections, but there's lots of people wanting to come in. Would you prefer them to come in, Richard, and then we'll sum at the end? Joanne?
Yeah, let's do that. I'll make notes, otherwise I'll forget. Yeah, go on, go. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Joanne.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks, Susie. In our group, I just made the point that in order to sort of let go of something, the ability to find some calmness and sort of release some of that inner tension that perhaps sometimes is the stuff that sort of blinds or takes away the focus and the sort of the kindness itself. I think just being able to whether it's mindfulness or it's just that pausing or it's that ability to sort of respond rather than react, it's just really, really important, I think, because kindness can't come out when we're angry, frustrated, we're pulled in lots of different situations. So I think it's just being able to get some calm to then get to kindness was the point I was trying to make. Yeah.
Thanks, Joanne. Great. Kelly.
Firstly, hi Joe Smith. Me and Joe are colleagues, so I didn't realise he was here. I feel like a shout out on the radio. I think it's really hard to get to the point of kindness, isn't it, before you can get to a point of acceptance. So I think particularly at the minute, we are being held a lot by our emotions, and our real reality is that we're expected to do more with less, and that never ends. So if we look at like burnout and morale and engagement, they're all going to be affected. So it is a bit chicken and egg in terms of how do we get back to a place of authenticity and then kindness, when it very much feels like we're being the people who are the NHS are being done to by the people who see it as a business.
Yeah. And I'm not going to come in because we'll use all the time, but you're very right. And Rich and I were talking this morning about the words we don't want the word kindness just to become another word. It's got to be authentically owned and led. Nina, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Susie. So a colleague in my group made a point that I loved. We need to get rid of the idea that kindness is weak. And then we talked about that and kind of built on it. And I made the point that actually we know now that there are a lot more, measurable elements. For example, mindfulness, we know that there are measurable effects of that on us as people. Things like kind of supportive conversations when people leave the organization. There's research on various different things that when you kind of boil it down, it kind of comes down to taking a kinder approach. So I think we need to kind of build on the link between the research and the science that we have that supports kind of, using kindness and having a bigger kindness agenda and the effect that has, so that we've kind of got that as a bit of a status quo and, those strands are coming into our BAU really.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nina. And then I saw Emma's hand up. Emma, is your hand still up, Emma? Emma Thompson.
Well, it was me that made the point about the weakness. So Nina and Joanne were both in our room when we kind of talked about that. So that's why I put my hand down. But it was just this idea that I feel like we need to let go of this idea that kindness is the weak option or the woolly fluffy option, and actually recognizing that sometimes it's difficult to be kind. Like Joanne said, in times of stress and high pressure, it's actually the difficult option to actually take the route of kindness sometimes, and it doesn't mean that we're weak.
Yeah. Fantastic. Richard, your thoughts and views. I could talk forever, but I'm going to try and keep shut up. I'll hand to you.
Okay, brilliant. Goodness, I don't know which bit to say first. Thank you, firstly, for your comments. I haven't had a chance to see what's in the chat because I'm not that great at multitasking, but I will have a read of it. I could talk about each of them. I think the piece about kindness, and you've actually led right into our next question, it almost like we'd pre-prepared your comments there, Emma and Nina, so thank you for that. But I hear a lot about kindness being a soft skill, which generally I think is just utter bullshit. That we think that we placed it in this box of a soft skill or a nice to have or a bonus if we've got time. I'll show you some kindness if I can be really bothered and I've done everything else, which is just a very curious way to live life. But kindness is deeply, deeply human work, and it's messy and it's complex and it's incredibly demanding, because kindness means that we have to attune to ourselves much better than we do generally. We have to attune here, which is why kindness is a hard conversation to be having, because it isn't just about this kind of the sprinkles on the top of the cake. It's about the cake. And the reason that this is difficult is because this isn't, if we're thinking about kindness within our system, and the way people show or don't show kindness, we are in some way complicit in it. We bring that quality of kindness, or we don't, because we get so entangled in other stories and identified with other ways of being. So the first place we have to look is, we have to look at ourselves. And what I will talk about in a bit is this idea of within the context and the system. So we can't just blame the individual if there isn't enough kindness, and I see that happen a lot. But the first place is about responsibility, and is about, so where do I bring kindness? Where do I not? Where do I make choices, or where have I made unconsciously some choices that says they get my kindness, but they don't get my kindness because they wound me up, or because they're always late, or because they're just a bit irritating? I won't show kindness to them, but because, you know, I absolutely love Nina, I'm going to show her loads of kindness because I think she's brilliant and ace and all of those things. So kindness, we have to check ourselves first about what we're bringing, and that is hard. But kindness is, I think, is incredibly complex, because whilst we have to attune to ourselves, we have to attune to others and notice micro movements. You know, ultimately this requires us to be conscious and plugged into our world. If we choose to do our days in some sleep-like state, as an automaton, as a machine, then kindness really becomes a bit impossible. And then just very quick, I'll go back to Simon's point, which is it. And I think, Susie, you said something about how we speak to people. I actually think it's about how we speak about people. And I've sat in many rooms where I've heard people speaking about others in very, very unkind ways. And sometimes that was patients, and sometimes that was other senior leaders and other people who weren't senior in the organization, but talking about them in vindictive, nasty, unkind ways. And once that's in the field, once it's out there, energetically it's out there. So whilst we go, well, it was behind closed doors, I don't believe that's how it works. I believe that it is all interconnected. And once we put something in the field, it's in the field. So that energy of unkindness is there, and it can't not be absorbed by others. We are incredibly porous beings, and it can't not be absorbed by us. So this is back to consciousness. Just check with yourselves as to the quality of kindness that you bring and where you bring it into the field. Because once it's in there, it's well, it's there. It's energetically absorbed, and it's out in the ether. So let's, for just 2 minutes, and we're just going to do thoughts in the chat. Do you see kindness as a weakness? Do you see kindness as a weakness? Does the system you work in see kindness as some kind of weakness? It might be yes, it might be no's, it might be slightly longer sentences, but just thoughts in the chat, and let's see what we get in a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to boringly talk a little bit more. I'm going to try and see if I can see the chat comments. Oh, there's lots of things to read, which I'll enjoy reading once we're finished. No, it's a strength. Yeah. Okay. It's an absolute strength.
Rich, can I just come in with one thing? Actually, that we probably need to just, I think, having worked within provider organisations and now supporting organisations through Aqua, I think this does touch on, and I know we're not getting into this, that the radical candor, because some messages are really difficult to give and they have to be given, but it's how we give them with kindness in the right way. And I think we've lost a little bit of that, because I think people find it difficult to give those messages because what they may receive back, and therefore we fall into a trap of it becoming an unkind conversation. And it's how we stay true to ourselves in giving those messages in a kind way, albeit it may not always be received until reflected on, that was the reason for why it was given, if that makes sense, Richard.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. These comments are are interesting, and I suppose in many ways I'm not surprised, because you 56 folks are here. Yeah. And what I'm interested in the ones who choose and actively choose not to be here because they think kindness is a waste of time, or is a nice to have, or it is fluffy and it is less important, and what matters is metrics, numbers, and all the stuff that you're beaten with when it doesn't work. So I think it's, you know, I have to remember that you've chosen to be here, folks, and you've chosen to be here for good reason. Okay, so it's all kind of saying the same thing, that innate quality, every human holding and passing to. Okay, so if people in the job survive on model kind of scripts. Yeah, I think it was something that I think it was something Nina said about this. There is so much science pointing to the efficacy and benefits of mindfulness and meditation. There's an abundance of science. We don't need any more science, as is true with where I started today about nature, the benefits of nature on our nervous system and the quality of our reparation and recovery when we have time in nature or access to nature. One of the reasons for moving to where we moved to, which is just north of Bath, is to be able to have access to the Dyson Centre at the RUH, which is a cancer centre that they promised would be, you know, leading edge, the best cancer centre in Europe, and it would have access to greenery. And well, actually doesn't have any of that stuff. You sit in a waiting room where they play Sky News with news about people being murdered. So I send an email to the chief executive saying, do I want to sit there waiting to see my oncologist, watching news items about people being murdered and people being sexually assaulted? Is that what I want? Can we not just play some nature videos of woodlands? And she said it was a brilliant idea and that they definitely get onto it, and yet it still plays Sky News to us. So I think that the science that tells us the environment in which we place ourselves and the context and the container in which we place ourselves is essential. I think what's also really important is that this session is not about putting responsibility on all of you to say, can you help the system recover? I think this is about where can you bring it into your systems, and how brave are you to bring it into your systems when there is pushback. And still, how do you bring it? And how do you name it when it isn't in the system? Which I don't imply that any of this is easy, because it isn't easy, especially when we are so identified with other stories and other ways of needing to be, and we're identified with our stress, and we're identified with old organizational patterns. Much of the time that is going to grip us and seduce us, and we'll be fused with that. And when we're fused with that, kindness is difficult. So the point about how do we at least calm ourselves down, settle ourselves, and that's an important first step before we can bring kindness in, I think is a very, very clever call.
Richard, can I just pick up a point on there from Simon? Because I think there's some fabulous comments on there.
Yeah.
But I think, and a lot of them are wrapped into this one actually as well. And it's, I expect everyone to be kind and personable, but as a strategy, it's a big ask investment to expect financial return. And I think that's really, it's a really impactful statement, because I think probably all of us will have been at a point where we come to work with kindness in our hearts, but there's a point where when you're just not receiving it back, whichever way you turn, you almost give up, and then you almost beat yourself up because you've lost that kindness, which is not what you want to do. And it's how we all together, you're right, not as you take an individual part of it, how do we shift to that tipping point of really making a difference in that space, that when we are being kind and personable and making that personal investment to it, that it does to some extent feel it is being given back. Because I think there is a point where people will feel, I can't do this anymore, not getting anything back. That's human nature.
I'll talk about that in a moment, actually, because I'll talk about the idea of exchange.
Yeah.
So I'll bring that in. So very quickly before we do that, Louisa asked a question, which I think is a great question, which I was just wondering about. Is there a difference between being kind and being nice? So my gut reaction to that is yes, there is. And I think I can be nice to someone, and I can be polite, and I don't necessarily need to show kindness. I think kindness has a different quality and flavor to it, I think. And I think nice is what I was taught as I grew up, to be nice to people. And for me, that has politeness entangled, and I can say hello and I can smile. And kindness is about me. Kindness is when my heart is cracked open, I think. And when my heart is cracked open, that means I allow in. And that also means if we're going to allow kindness in, we have to allow the opposite polarity in, which I guess is, what is the opposite of kindness? Is it hurt? Is it vindictive? Is it, don't just say unkind. I said unkind. But anyway, we have to allow for the other polarity to come in, the hurt. And I think kindness is about what our hearts are cracked open. It's the moments of I can be polite to the person in the checkout behind me, but do I show them kindness? Do I still hold an open heart and kindness to someone who is rude or abrupt or short? Well, I don't know what their day holds. What I do know from my work is that people hold extraordinary amounts of stuff that is unbelievable and unbearable, and I wonder how they walk the planet, but they do. And I think often we forget the amount of stuff that people carry. We have no idea most of the time. So I hope that I still offer kindness to people who are short and abrupt and rude. Will I keep doing it? Depends on the relationship with them. But I think there is this, I think what's important is that we hold kindness also within the frame of some tough love. And I talk about that a lot with leadership teams, that how do we hold love and at the same time hold tough? Because we don't have to have one or the other. What we have to find ways of having is both. There's which I shared with Susie earlier, that just brilliant Rumi quote, which I will paraphrase, but this idea of over there, somewhere between right and wrong, there is a field, and I'll meet you there. Which is this idea of we don't just occupy the right and the wrong. What we're talking about today is occupying the field in the middle, which is the space that can include the rights and the wrongs, the kindness and the hurtful comments, that we include all of it. That's, I think, our ability as being the best humans we can be walking this planet through this time right now is our ability to tolerate and hold both and, not either or. And I know in your health and social care and NHS space, often you're being told to hold one over the other. Hold this polarity and not that one. Stand in the field of right or wrong, but not in the field that's in the middle. And much of this work, unfortunately, for the people who like standing either side and either end, much of this work is in the middle. We have to stand in the field in the middle and include both. Okay, I have to move on, otherwise my timing's already absolutely stuffed. Anyway, if Christina, could you bring the slide up, please? And I'll teach what I was going to share in 15 minutes in about 7.5 seconds. There we go. Thanks very much. Okay. So for quite a few years now, I've worked with systemic constellations, and this is a work that I feel very passionately drawn to. It's the work of a German therapist and educator called Bert Hellinger, who studied how relationships and groups function, especially when people feel connected. And his work is far-reaching. You could go and Google a lot about Bert Hellinger's style and philosophy. But he identified that there are three natural orders that keep relationships and organizations in the most healthy state. And I want to share those, and I want to share them as a, I guess, as a frame of reference for you, again, in thinking about the quality of leadership that and story and kindness that you bring to the systems that you touch. And that might be your work system, and it might be your family system, or it might be your community system. And for me, the systemic constellation work is about, sometimes I work with families on that, and sometimes I work with leadership teams, is about using our somatic intelligence. So our cognitive intelligence is a small percentage of where we get our information and our insight from. It's probably 4 to 5 to 6% of actually what's available. The rest of our intelligence is available somatically. That means in our body, we hold our intelligence and we hold enormous information, which is, Bessel van der Kolk's book about the body keeps the score, which is this idea of our body holds it. Our body holds every single moment of our lives. It's stored. The joy and the pain, it's stored in our system. I think the same is true with familial systems, with organizational systems. So my systemic work is about accessing, inviting people to access their somatic intelligence in order to make change and adaptation within the system that they spend much of their time. So the three orders which I want to share with you before we send you off into wave you goodbye into another breakout room. The first one he talks about is this idea of belonging. So these are, he refers to them, some people refer to them as laws. That feels quite harsh. He refers to them as orders, and that when one of these orders is in some way compromised, the system loses balance. So the first one is belonging, and his piece here is about everyone has a right to belong. And when people feel excluded for some reason or unseen, that's when the hidden tensions will arise. So this is about noticing what happens when we exclude a voice, or we exclude a part of the system, or we exclude someone's view as being less important than ours, or we sideline someone from a project. And that the moment we exclude a part of the system is out of balance. And actually what is required of us is to include everything that has ever been a part of the system. And that might be as simple as acknowledging that is a part of the system. Yes, Fred Jones, who was the chief executive from 10 years ago, has left, but actually he's energetically, there is still some residue of him in the system. And this is about recognition that every voice and every being has a place, and that we give them a place. And whilst we might say there's something formal about ensuring that everyone has a place and included, for me, and I hope this will make sense, but this is more about energetically included, so that within our psyche, we know that they remain a part of it. So it's even just making that statement, and that there is an agreement to that people are included. What I see a lot in the boards and exec teams that I work with is that often pieces are excluded. We don't need to look very far now politically at our landscape to see what happens when there is division and when people are excluded. We exclude people, the system goes out of balance. The system in which we live becomes unhealthy. The second piece in here, the middle one with the stones, is about order, which actually was originally about hierarchy. So Hellinger had a view around hierarchy supports flow, that we must acknowledge who came first in the system, and that every system has an order to it. I think in an organizational context, this is more useful to think about it, that this is about clarity of order, clarity of roles, clarity of responsibility. And when that is blurred, and when there isn't clarity, confusion and stress and disharmony is what we'll find more of in the system. And the third piece, which is the part that I touched on when Susie talked earlier, is about balance of giving and taking. So if we are giving more than we are getting from a system, or vice versa, the system again is out of balance. So this last one is about the order of exchange. So in order for a system to be sustainable, we have to balance contribution and acknowledgement. We have to find ways of balancing what is put into the system and then what is given back to the giver to the system. And whilst our mind might go to things like that's about pay and maternal, paternal leave, it might be about all of those things, and it might be at the kernel of what we're talking about today, which is the exchange of kindness, which is about reciprocity, which is about, for yourself, checking what are you giving to the system and what are you getting back. And think of this in the other systems in which you play, your family system, your community system, the sporting and friendship systems that you might play in. Where does the exchange feel like it has some balance? And what's that like when it does? When you feel that what you get out of the system and what you give to the system, there is this exchange, there is a dance that goes on. But what becomes problematic is when we realize that where there is this imbalance of what is given and what is received. Yeah, so I'm conscious of time, but this is really about what happens when we restore natural order to any system. Then the system can start to recover itself. And I wanted to share this with you because I think it offers an additional lens for us to just think about and feel into. What is this like in the system in which you play? Where does it fit? Which one of these three feels as if they are an order that has some balance and alignment to it, and which of them feel as if they are slightly on the wonk? Okay, I'm going to send you into a breakout group, if that's okay, because we are a little bit behind, and I'll read questions when you go into your, I'll read your chat when you go into your breakout groups. So we're sending you off for 10 minutes. Again, it will be groups of 5 to 7-ish. And there are 2 questions for you to consider. I don't know why I'm reading it to you because I'm assuming that you shouldn't assume that, but that you can read. How does our healthcare system view kindness? And what conditions are necessary for there to be growth? But that last question really is about, if we think of where I started today about growing and nurturing hedgerows and trees and plants and rewilding, in order for that to happen, the ground and the soil and the land has to be nutrient dense. So what are the conditions of the land that you are currently growing within? Are there enough nutrients for you to grow? Are there enough nutrients for others to grow? There is a caveat in this, which is clearly from reading the chat, there are a lot of people here who already bring an abundance of kindness to this system. So we know that. This is saying about what are the ways in which you can bring more, or where in the system, again, are you making it conditional? Well, I'll bring it to you, but not to you. Where in the system might you want to have more kindness coming back to you, or more kindness being shown and offered to others? Therefore, what conditions are necessary for there to be more growth? Okay, so this is about new growth, and it is also about continuing to tend the growth that is already present. So you're going off for 10 minutes. We'll see you back in this room. Travel safe. Again, give others a chance to speak, and make sure you get the chance and space to say what you want to say. Hello, welcome back, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you, Isha, for traveling them safely there and safely back again.
Thanks all, as last time, for going out and sharing your thoughts in that space. Never easy, but always great to see people do it. So the question that Richard put to you this time was, how does healthcare view kindness and the conditions necessary for there to be growth. Again, anyone who feels they can and wants to speak up, please do. We want to hear your voices. We want to see your voices. We want to hear your views, or put them in the chat. So just a couple of minutes. And again, Richard will gather feedback and then we will respond. Anyone brave enough to put their hands up? Zed. Zed, have I pronounced that right?
Yeah, you have, yes. Can't get that wrong, really.
Hiya. Hiya.
Okay. I think we've had a discussion in our group, and I think the key thing is the NHS, I think, sometimes views being nice as being kind.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily being kind. I mean, just use an adjective. You know, when people are in an A&E waiting room, it's nice to keep them there. But the kind thing would be, do you know what? You're in the wrong place. You need to go home and be in your own comfort in your own house and wait to be seen by the right person, and rather than being in an environment where you're going to end up catching a lot more things. And what we're saying is, well, actually, no, that's not being kind, that's being cruel. Well, no, actually, that's just being nice. That's not being kind. And I think that's where the crossover is, in that understanding of what's kind, what's nice. And we think by being nice, we're being kind. And in reality, we're not.
Yeah. And it's thanks, Ed, and I know Rich will come back on it. I think you're very right, and I mentioned it earlier. It's almost about this radical candor, isn't it? How are we kind in the right way? But there's something in that for me which I'm going to throw in there as well, around honesty with that kindness. That's really important, because without honesty and trust, kindness doesn't really mean anything, and I think that's important. Amanda.
Hi, thank you for welcoming me in. Feel free to call me Mandy.
Mandy, I will.
Amanda's that's great. Mandy's my Sunday name. So we talked about it being something that you can feel. We've got somebody who worked externally and worked with lots of NHS organisations, saying you can feel when people are trying to work with kindness and be kind, but when it's maybe functional or tactical. And then we said, how does it view kindness? We said optional, maybe expected, but not necessarily always given and delivered.
I think really important points, Mandy. Rich, anyone's hands up? Stuart, I'm just trying to take as many as we can before we. Stuart.
Yeah, I think we went along the same lines as Mandy, where the bit I was struggling with is you can have kindness in sort of your heart all the way through your decision-making process, but it may not actually be in the result. You could find, if you're dealing with someone, I've got 92 ways I can be kind to them, but actually when I balance that with what the business needs, I can only do 2 of them. And it's where does that sort of kindness start and end, and how much kindness do you need to show?
Yeah, and it's back to that conversation, isn't it, about even if it's a difficult conversation within those decisions, and some of them can't be reached, how do we deliver it with kindness? I guess for me. Richard, do you want to come in on that? I can't see any more. No, sorry, I can see one more. Sorry, Hannah.
I think there's something about organisations, they on the outside they look like they're being kind. We've all got values, we've all got health and wellness days and all of these different things, but the reality is that we're not living our values, and we don't see our leaders living those values either. And we don't see them embedded in our day-to-day and what we do. And there's loads of ways that we could be doing that, but at the moment we have things that are on paper, but we're not seeing those behaviours in practice in what we're doing. I think there's that disconnect.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. And I've just seen something similar in the chat from Jane Cryer and her group around psychological safety to challenge, and the point you're making, Hannah, about the importance of leaders role modelling with kindness to educate and normalise. I don't know if you were in that group, but I think it's really important, in you know, it does need to feature in our leadership. I see it slip more and more at the moment, but I think it's really important. Thank you. Richard, do you want to come in? I don't see any other hands up.
So much. I don't know which bit to say first. I'll jump around a bit. Yeah. Okay. So I'll go last first. Hannah. Yeah. Well, God, these value conversations that I see leadership teams having, like endlessly, and then they put them on like the walls and paint them and make them look really pretty and put them on mouse mats and t-shirts. But actually, it doesn't generally stack up. But it doesn't filter through into behaviour. And I talked earlier about first order change, and for me that's an example of first order change, is that we have the conversations and we move some of the furniture around and we decorate the walls.
Richard, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we've lost you off the screen.
Oh.
I know everyone will want to see your face.
No, it's a good thing. Hang on a second. Oh, it's my camera's having a right strop, which means. Okay, that might. Oh no, that means I'm gonna have to go to my laptop camera. I'm just going to keep talking until it gets to, if that's all right, and we'll just have to go with the dodgy black and white picture. Yeah, just go with that. No, I'm still here. That's first order change. We decorate the walls and we put nice curtains up and we make it look all pretty, but actually, the foundations are cracked and there is rupture in the walls, and we don't do that work. And lots of organisations have those values conversations in health and wellness days because they're done as a should. And shoulds are dangerous because shoulds generally don't belong to us. Shoulds are often the rules of someone else. And we're not doing things because we want to or because we need to. We're doing them because we should do them, because the rules tell us. And that is problematic. There's one other piece on that as well, which is that whoever and whatever story sits at the very top of the system will filter down into the rest of the system. And they did a really interesting piece of research when Trump was first voted into being president, at what happened to the general US culture, and that the culture became much more aligned with him at the very top of the system and his stories and his views and his ideologies were much more rampant across the wider system because of what sits at the top. And that will be true in our organizational systems. It will be true in our family systems. Whoever sits at the top and whatever the story is and the value set and the energy will filter down into the entire system, which is why actually there's so much you can do as people that you will take back into your systems after this session. But actually, we are reliant on the systems making second order change, which is the leadership teams coming around a table and being daring enough to make some very brave and bold decisions and hold themselves accountable and be open to being held accountable by others for their action. That is the hard work. But it is necessary and it is essential. Stuart, I think you're absolutely right about what you said about holding kindness, but ultimately we have to be truthful. But it's, can we still be tough? And can we still be kind? And my view is we can. And that doesn't mean that the person or the people on the receiving end of that in that moment will feel like it's the best deal in the world, because they might not. But at some point, they will acknowledge, this is my belief anyway, it's not the truth, but I hold it as my truth, is that we will recognize that at some point that we were treated with kindness, even though the decision was hard and difficult and dramatically changed our lives. It was done in a way that was kind. And I think that is possible. And it comes back to something Kath said earlier, which is about intentionality. And intention is everything. Our intentions for every action and every choice we make is everything. I'm going to, and then just one other point I'll pick up before I tinker around with this bloody camera. Mandy, you said about being able to feel it in the system, and that we can notice it when we feel it, but it becomes tactical and functional, and optional was the word. And if we think about kindness coming back from our very formative years, our early years in childhood is where we are first, hopefully, kindness is modeled to us by our caregivers. So we will have our first experience of receiving kindness. For most of us, that is the case. For some people, I also appreciate that that is not their story, that kindness wasn't what was shown to them in their early years, or not enough kindness. But really, it's not optional in childhood. As parents, a part of our responsibility is to model and show and bring kindness to that relationship and to that being that we just brought into the world. That's the piece about it being inherent in us. But I understand for a lot of people that was not their blueprint. But it's an interesting one that organisations might hold that idea as being optional. Susie, can you talk about something maybe in the comments whilst I fiddle around with the camera? Is that all right? Or sing a song or something, or read a poem. Or
yeah, thanks, Richard. And actually, what I would like us to do now, while you fiddle around with your camera, is I'm going to jump to what does this mean, and the offer for the future. And I think what we're hearing, and the feedback and the comments and the thoughts and the questions and the challenge, is that this is a really important space for people, and that we've got probably some of the most converted people joining us today on this screen. I guess the question I have, and what I want to put to you with Richard, is, so what next? And I really just want to take a moment before we hand back to Richard to talk some final things and a poem, and perhaps some reflection space for you all. Is what we want to hear from you is, has this been helpful? Has this helped you think and create a space that's different to what you normally receive? And what we really want to offer to you is an opportunity for you to think about your organisations or your teams, and whether we come and work alongside some of you to see if we can pilot and shift this whole concept of bringing kindness alongside our day-to-day working, that really shifts the cultures in organisation into the positive frame we want it to be. And I want to just pause there for anyone to come back, put their hands up, give me some thoughts about that, put some things in the chat. Do we feel that it's an important space for us to get into and see if we can really create a movement from the willing and interested people on this call? Speak to me. Speak to Richard and I. Hi.
Hi, sorry, I'm Aoife. I'm a professional midwifery advocate lead for MFT.
Hi.
And I'm not too sure on what was just said, but I just want to say that this talk has really helped me really open my eyes about the difference between being nice and being kind, because it's not something I've ever even thought about before. Like, I haven't questioned it. I recently did a compassionate leadership level 7, and during that I had to evaluate and decide whether the pros and the cons of compassionate leadership. And again, it's something I've never thought about, like the negatives of compassionate leadership. So I just feel like with all the resources at the minute, it is really making me think very differently about myself and the environment we work in. And it is really making me think, is work a place of kindness? And just, yeah, it's been a really, really good session. It's really helped provoke a lot of thoughts within myself. Yeah, and definitely something I'd be interested in if this was, going to continue and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, firstly, for for sharing that, and that this is new thinking for you alongside all the thinking you've done through leadership. Fabulous, and glad that we've brought something slightly different today, because that's what we wanted to do. And I think it's really interesting when I listen to you, because I think myself, I've been on a similar journey that's got me to where I am, about how I've connected it all together, and the work I've done, learned through Richard. And it's really great to hear that. And I think we're really looking to work with people like yourselves and organisations that really want to try and embed this in their day-to-day practice to shift the culture that they're working in. So thank you very much, and we'll make contact after the call.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you.
Eva. My camera's having a right drop. Some people would say it's being kind to you all to not have my camera on, but I'm going to get it back in a second. Yeah, thank you, Eva. And I think, there are lots of qualities that we go around our life. We live our life and we don't actually pay attention to individual qualities that we bring. And until in some way we are brought to our knees and we are tasked with giving them some energy and some power. And this, of course, kindness is just one of them. So where we're going to go for the last 15 minutes or so is, I think that offer from Susie is important and is a bold one in saying, how up are you for doing some work in your organization and playing around with this idea? But playing is important, and playing with it seriously and authentically, with a daring to do some different work. And that work would ultimately be quite uncomfortable, because this work requires some wintering, which we're going through now, which is the shedding of, in order to get back to some truth. So Richard, I hope that there are enough.
Richard, can I just come in very quickly there, because there's a comment in the chat box, and I think it's really helpful from Simon. And Simon, I've responded to you. I won't go into the detail of it, but I think it's a really important point you make in the question, which is, this has to be owned top down and bottom up, from the board down. And I've responded to you there about supporting that, because it is really important that everyone buys into this for it to flourish. I'll shut up now, Richard.
No, it's great. Thank you. Well, it's good because we're going to bring a slide up. So Christina, sorry, could you bring up that last slide of nutrients, and I'll talk it through, and then I'll beat the camera into submission again. Okay, so this will be quite quick points actually to touch on. Yeah, so the first one is, I think this is really useful. It's been really useful for me using CIA as a model, which is, I think of it as having 3 buckets: my control bucket, my influence bucket, and my accept bucket. And of course, the reality is there are a certain number of things that are in our control bucket. So these are the items and actions that we have absolute control over and that sit with us. And nothing can change that. Those are ours. And then we have the next bucket, which is our what do I influence bucket. So I don't control it. It's not mine to own, but I do have influence. The choices I make and how discerning I am about the actions I bring, I can influence the story. I can influence the agenda. I can influence the culture and the feel of it. And in my third bucket is an acceptance bucket, which says I have to accept that right now there is nothing I can do about that thing, because it might not be mine, it might not belong to me, but I accept it. And when I accept it, I let it go, and I stop giving it energy, and I stop spending currency on it. What often happens to people is that we get our control and our influence buckets muddled up, and the things that we have influence over, we stick in our control bucket, and then we fight to control them. I want you just to think about, in relationship to kindness, what's in your control bucket? So where do you control bringing kindness, receiving kindness, naming when unkindness is displayed and visible? What do you influence? and what do you need to accept and let go of and say, that's not mine? Changing the entire healthcare landscape into one that is built on a primary currency of kindness, we have to accept and go, that is not ours right now to do. However, there is a load of stuff in my control bucket, my influence bucket, that is mine. So I challenge you gently just to think about that as you leave here today. The second one in this is, if we really want to bring kindness into any system in which we play, or in fact any quality we want to bring growth to it, is we have to slow right down and then go a bit slower and a little bit slower, which is hard because what we're being told is that we need to go faster, do more, do it faster. We will only bring kindness to bear if we slow right down. And the third point is, in my old life, I was a musician and I trained as an opera singer, and I worked as a singer a bit. And then I'm often asked the question, what's the difference between extraordinary musicianship and good musicianship? And whilst we all play the same notes, because there's only one set of notes available, the difference is the space between the notes and the time that we take between the first note we play and the second note we play. That's what makes the difference between good and extraordinary. And you, I'm sure, are tasked with coming into work every day and having to play hundreds and hundreds of notes. And what makes the difference between you being good and being the most extraordinary version of yourself is taking space between each note. And that space gives you choice to decide, to consider, to reflect, to notice what you're allowing in, to notice where your heart is cracked open, to notice when it's closed shut, and then you make a choice about the note you play. So these nutrients are about feeding your soil, encouraging your soil to bring new growth to bear. So just reflect on each of those three and feel which one has most resonance. So I'm going to attempt to pop the camera back on for a minute. I'm going to read a short poem, and then we're going to take some questions for a few minutes. So bear with me. This is enormously frustrating, but clearly is how it is. Okay, it's not coming back on at all. Okay, well, I'm going to have to swap cameras. Sit tight for a second. Sorry. Real life stuff, folks, isn't it? How do I change camera? There we go. So I'm going to change to laptop camera, which will be terrible. What it is. Okay, so that should be that camera. So is the camera coming back on? There's a camera, but there we go. It's not a great camera.
You're back.
So I'm back, and I'm going to read you a poem, and then we are going to take some questions, and then we're going to wish you well as you venture back out into your landscapes. So 2 pieces I'm going to read to you. The first one is a poem called Tending. We turn the soil and it turns us. Our hands remembering what roots already know. That kindness grows the way a garden does. By touch, by patience, by leaving space for rain, for each other, for what comes back, unasked and flowering. And then, I don't know if any of you have read the book by Robin Wall Kimmerer called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's all about indigenous wisdom. She's a beautiful, beautiful writer, and it actually holds a lot of what we've talked about today. But this is a paragraph from her book. If one pecan tree fruits, they all fruit. There are no soloists, not one tree in a grove, but the whole grove. Not one grove in the forest, but every grove, all across the county and all across the state. The trees act not as individuals, but somehow as a collective. Exactly how they do this, we don't yet know. But what we see is the power of unity. What happens to one happens to us all. We can starve together or feast together. All flourishing is mutual. All flourishing is mutual. So we go back to this idea of what we put into the field. What we put into the field has energetic resonance and it has a life of its own. So those moments of unkindness, they have life and they have a force of their own, which brings us back to being very discerning and considerate about where we choose to spend our kindness or not. Zip, shush, quiet, and should we take a few questions in whatever way you usually do this? How do we do that? Do people just put their hands up, or
it might just be thoughts and reflections as well, Richard, mightn't it? It doesn't have to be questions.
No.
Sharon.
Yeah, just about you said if someone's not responding to your kindness, do you just carry on or do you forget it? My thoughts are that you would just carry on being kind, maybe reserve your energy and be kind to somebody else rather than that person. But it's you as a person. You don't want to change yourself as a person. You want to carry on being kind, and also that person down the line in years to come might recollect how kind you were. So you don't always realise the effects that you're having on people immediately. It could be later. So it's just a thought.
It's
that once you're kind,
thought.
if somebody's not kind, don't think that, oh, it's negative, it's lost, I'm wasting my time. It's actually really good.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thought, Sharon.
It's very powerful. I think we have to wonder why people perhaps have become so closed to receiving kindness, why their hearts have become sealed up. And I hear a lot of people's stories, and I understand why their hearts have become sealed over and shielded. And I think that's something for us, again, to wonder about in those moments. What is it that this person carries that I have no idea of, that means right now that feels like their only choice available to them. So that's a very conscious, intelligent and attuned way of being. And of course it's hard when the world is pulling us and we're in a rush and we're behind and someone's going to beat our backsides if we don't work a bit harder. And actually it's like, how do we stand in the field and acknowledge both? We're going to be beaten need to work harder and do more with less. And actually, how do I still bring kindness to the system? How do I find that middle place of including both? Remember the Hellinger's view of when we exclude one, then the system is already out of balance. Great, thank you very much. Who else? What else?
So, Stuart, come in.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, the one thing that I'm sort of keep going around in my head is that middle place, is that fairness? Is that actually as kind as we can be sometimes, to look at everything we have available and everything we can do, and actually what we can give and go, well, actually, I'll be fair. Is that maybe sometimes the kindest we can be, to be fair to everyone when we're making those decisions?
There is silence, Stuart, because there is reflection.
Yeah.
I think it's a really, it's a big question, and fairness becomes another quality. And can we be fair to everyone all of the time? I suppose what we can have, when I said earlier about intention is everything. So we have the intention of, and that doesn't always mean that that's how it will be received. People received it as a lack of fairness, and that we did exclude them in some way.
Yeah,
yet actually when our intention wasn't to do that. So again, it's about perspective, and it's about listening, and it's about hearing the feedback from someone that maybe they felt like they were excluded, or it wasn't fair, or for me, this is about being our most fully human, the best version. Rudolf Steiner's work about anthroposophical ways of living, which is the art and science of being most fully human. And I really like that idea about most fully, because it's not about being the best human, or it's not about always being happy. It's about being most fully ourselves. Which
you
means,
bring me my charger.
Come on, Al, bring the charger in. Hurry up. I think it's about this. We must include both. We have to include both polarities. If we want peace in the world, we have to acknowledge that there will also be war. We can't not have the other polarity. If we only go for peace and we exclude war, then our system goes out of balance. So perhaps fairness is about including both. We have to include that there will be both responses to some of our decisions, which are difficult and involve people's. The decisions we make each day will be affecting people's lives in ways that we could probably never imagine. So I feel like it sits with us to bring as much kindness to bear as we possibly can. Ultimately, we have to check ourselves at the end of the day. We have to put our head down on the bed and go, did I act with the most amount of kindness I could? And where did I not? Tomorrow we get up and we go again. I think it's a great question, Stuart. Thank you. Any others before we
Rena,
wrap up?
What's your name right?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. This is not a question necessarily, it's just a reflection. I work in public health, so not in the NHS so much anymore, but I come from a medical background. I think I was wondering about what the conditions that foster, I suppose, the opposites of kindness or hostility, I think. And I think for me, there's something about, most colleagues on the call that are sort of geared up, I suppose, or attracted to a health or a caring profession have certain personality traits. Often they're more, innately caring people. And I wonder what it is in the culture or what it is in the conditions that I suppose forces these people to put on that armor on at work, I guess, and to be more unkind, I suppose, to people, to whether that be patients, colleagues, or in the system in the widest sense. So I suppose that was a reflection, really. I left the NHS because of the unkindness and the hostility, really, and went into public health because of that. So I often wonder about what it is in the NHS in particular, because I don't see it so much in other health and care organisations across the wider system. So I don't think it's an inevitability that there is unkindness and hostility in a system. So I wonder what it is particularly about the NHS.
A super question. I don't know that I have an answer. I think as I was saying to Susie earlier, we often hold Q&A sessions that there is a hope for an answer, and I don't know, often there isn't an answer, but people want one. I think what we do have is a response, and I guess my response to it is, I don't know specifically why in the NHS. I have a, and this is just a feeling that I have from what I've observed in the past, is that there has been, having watched the way boards have been treated, and I've watched the way what happens when they're called up to London for a board meeting, and the detail of how chairs are arranged around a table and who sits opposite who, and it feels about power and dominance and hierarchy, and that I've watched them be beaten into a pulp, and I've watched them come back in their pulp-like form, expected to lead their organisation the next day better than they were before. And I think it's like, how many times does that happen to us? And how many times does it happen to children when they're very, very young, when they're not cared for and they're not shown kindness? Actually, they're shown the opposite. And now the conditions that they're growing up in to armor themselves up and to build their survival personality that keeps them safe. And it's the only way they can come in each day. And I've watched that too many times in leadership teams where that's happened. And I then see, why would you risk all of yourself? Why would you bring all of yourself in the next day if what happens is someone's going to beat you with a stick? I'm going to bring in the limited version of me that can tolerate that, and I'm going to leave the rest of me somewhere else because it becomes too dangerous. So I can only say that's what I've witnessed too many times within the NHS. That's not the truth because it's not the truth. It's just what I've seen and felt and listened to. But it makes sense, right? How much will we put up with before we go no more? And I'll either leave or I'll just armor myself up so much you can't get to me. But also that means I can't get out.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to let anything in. But I'm not able to really show and express kindness because that means cracking open and taking the armor off, and that's too dangerous.
And Richard, just to come in there, and I think it's something you and I have talked about a lot, and I think it's a really good reflection or thought-provoking piece, really, because I feel, having worked in many roles in the NHS and in academia, that we still have leaders who will use the right language of leading with kindness or words such as transformational change or whatever it may be, because that's what they believe the right word or rhetoric at the time. Do they truly do it and understand it and have taken the time to understand what it means to them, what it means to others, the difficult place it can take you while you're doing that learning? I'm not sure we do that deep-rooted thinking and learning in some of the leadership spaces and leadership programs that we run. I think for me there's a little piece, because it takes time to work through that. It's not a quick fix. There's not a quick evidence base behind it. You have to test it, try, fail, learn, continue the loop. And I'm not sure we've built that into our learning for leaders. Would be another view of mine alongside others.
Thank you, Susie. I think we need to wrap up, and I think we'll hand back to Kath. I think just my final thought is I will. So Susie's made an offer, which is a very genuine offer to see what's possible with this. I will pop my email address in there, and because I know sometimes people leave with other thoughts and confusions, and you're very welcome to. I'm always really open to having conversations about this stuff afterwards, especially if in any way you feel stuck with any of it. But mostly I thank you for being here and for, I guess, opening your hearts enough to this. And it goes back to really where Kath started about love, that's always my intention, to bring that quality to bear. And even though some will find that quite difficult especially in a work context, but I think it kind of doesn't really matter, but that's a quality to bring. So thank you for bringing yourselves in and bringing your comments in and being open to what we've talked about, and for standing up for kindness, and being open to checking yourselves with when you bring it and when you don't. And intention is everything. So thank you for playing today. And Susie, I don't know if you want to say anything else before Kath wraps up.
I don't know, just really to reiterate what you've said, Richard, thanks just to everybody who's joined. It's great to have spent time with people really partake in it. The feedback into the chat box and the questions are fabulous. I just thoroughly feel privileged to have had the time with you, Richard, to do this and prepare for it. So thank you to you. Thanks to the team for helping us, but I hope we can take this on and really nurture a movement within the organisation, really nurture those seeds and move this forward, because I think it's vitally important in terms of the future of our NHS and the public services. Thank you.
And I'd just like to thank Richard and Susie for a fabulous session this morning. When we started, I wasn't quite sure how it was going to go. I was excited and really intrigued and maybe a little bit nervous, but I've got to say it's been a real privilege to spend a couple of hours really thinking about kindness and how kindness shows up or doesn't. I've taken the opportunity to reflect on my kindness practice and perhaps times when I'm not as kind as I could be and should be. And how can I be more intentional about that going forward? And I think the overriding feeling that I'm leaving with today is one of hope. So I started out by talking earlier about, you know, how the world can feel a bit doom and gloom, and you know that it isn't a kind place to be, and what I've felt in this virtual room today is that there are a bunch of people who are really interested in this stuff, who are really interested in showing up authentically, kindly, with love. And that's the light that gets through the darkness. So thank you so much for being part of the session this morning. It's been a real honour and a privilege to have spent time with you all. Please do complete the evaluation form. The QR code is on the screen now. We take the feedback really seriously. We want to know how we've done and how we can do things better. All the resources will be available to you in the coming days, and they will come out from us. Please do come along to our next masterclass. So I think we've got one in January. I think there's a slide that will pop up, Powerful Allyship in January. And be part of the Masterclass series. We will be going into a new year and doing a whole new range of masterclasses with equally inspiring and influential people as Susie and Richard. So it would be great to see you at some of those. And thank you very much to everyone. Have a great day.